He made dream automobiles out of actual garbage, welded in quiet, and grinned for the cameras for years. It's what you can create, not what you already have. However, something far darker was roaring in the background, hidden beneath the flash of chrome and the boom of motors. Chad Hiltz, popularly known as Bad Chad, has finally acknowledged the one thing that fans have been speculating about for years at the age of 53. It has nothing to do with fame, money, or even the pressure of being in the spotlight. This is more intimate and profound, and it has angered and devastated fans. In an unvarnished moment of candor, he said something no one had anticipated. "I have to keep this a secret, but what is hidden? And why? What would drive a man so fearless and unrestrained to hide something for decades? Now that the truth is out, everything we believed to be true about him is altered. Bad Chad is who? He was simply Chad Hiltz from the tiny hamlet of Canning, Nova Scotia, long before the world became to know him as Bad Chad. Just a youngster with lofty goals and just enough money to get by. No fancy gadgets, no silver spoon. But his creativity, drive, and almost compulsive zeal for creating something out of nothing more than made up for his lack of wealth. He had a difficult childhood. After dropping out of high school and enduring a difficult upbringing, Chad appeared headed for a modest, industrious existence away from celebrity. But there was a mechanical genius concealed among that small-town rebel. A man capable of creating stunning bespoke vehicles out of scrap metal and disassembled pieces. His physique was unvarnished, creative, and completely out of the ordinary, frequently sewn together using supplies that the majority of builders would never even touch. That's precisely what set him apart. The debut of Bad Chad Customs on Discovery Channel was Chad's big break. Shining luxury garages and large budget projects were not the focus of the presentation. It was something else. The show followed Chad and his close-knit group, which included his partner Jolene McIntyre, as they took on ambitious projects on short budgets. It was set in Hiltz Auto Co., his small workshop in Nova Scotia. The audience was immediately captivated, attracted not only by the automobile's inventiveness, but also by Chad's magnetic pandemonium. According to Hiltz, millions of people watched the first season of Discovery Channel's Bad Chad Customs when it aired internationally in 2019. Additionally, social media was our only option after the company postponed the third season's development. He was the real deal to his supporters. Purist norms and industrial regulations didn't matter to him. He would transform airplane components into spoilers and solder license plates onto fenders. He didn't pretend to be someone he wasn't. He was tenacious and scrappy. He became instantly famous due to his unrestrained energy, frank honesty, and quirky sense of style. He wasn't only making cars though, he was creating a legend, that underdog genius myth. A man who lived outside the system, broke the mold, and defied expectations. Thousands of people all across the world were inspired by that narrative, but it also set an unrealistic standard. Chad came to represent unrestrained creativity, but there was a high cost for that. Behind the scenes, he started to feel the weight of an ever-increasing fan base, the pressures of television production, and the demands of ongoing innovation. Chad stayed public and vulnerable, in contrast to many reality stars who slipped into comfortable anonymity. Every decision, initiative, and post was carefully considered, and gradually things started to change. Online whispers started to circulate. Was he exhausting himself? Was he succumbing to the pressure? A few admirers observed shifts in his behavior. He was still intelligent, but he was also more preoccupied and aloof. Though it flickered occasionally, the spark was still present. Then there were those who were critical. Just as many ardent admirers questioned his craftsmanship as there were who applauded his inventiveness. His builds were dissected by keyboard experts. His methods were ridiculed in online forums. He was accused of being careless by some. He was more of a showman than a craftsman, according to others, and was merely a TV mechanic. Nevertheless, Chad continued to create, continue to smile, and keep moving forward. Because something was actually happening behind the curtain. Something he had long suppressed. "I'm forced to hide this," he finally stated, shattering the idea completely. Fans believed they knew the man was real, but he was also hurting. And Chad couldn't outbuild this secret, no matter how horrible it was. The image versus the guy, creating a myth. Unexpected things transpired as Chad Hiltz took center stage as Bad Chad. His rise to fame was not limited to the realm of custom cars. He turned into a myth, a symbol, and a living example of defiance, perseverance, and unreserved independence. It wasn't made in a studio in Hollywood. Neither branding specialists nor publicists promoted it. It developed naturally, one obstinate choice at a time, one roof cut, one backyard weld. As Chad turned actual junk into artwork, admirers gazed in wonder. Not only automobiles, but moving works of art. People adored him for breaking the rules because he didn't believe in them. He was the one who didn't fit in. He was dressed in tattered t-shirts rather than store uniforms with embroidery. If necessary, he used a kitchen spoon to spray paint. With a hammer and determination, he would reshape corroded metal. It appeared chaotic to others. It appeared to be freedom to others. Chad Hiltz did more than just construct automobiles. He was constructing a story. Moreover, the story was captivating. Bad Chad Customs provided something genuine, or at least something that seemed genuine, in a world full of overproduced TV series and phony drama. The skeleton workforce, the small-town garage, the difficult deadlines, and the conflict between Chad's extravagant ideals and his financial constraints. Everything operated like magic. For the modern gearhead, he became a folk hero. Our benefit over other YouTube channels, in my opinion, is that it's very unvarnished and genuine. The issue with folk heroes is that, as Jolene McIntyre stated, they don't show the real deal where we show the real process from start to finish. They are not wanted to change. Chad's legend expanded along with his fame. Supporters started projecting their own values onto him. The outside genius who overcomes the obstacles without selling out, the self-made man, the working-class brilliant. Many people found great meaning in the fact that he became the success story of the average person. However, it also turned into a cage. Chad had to transcend himself in order to live up to the mythology. He needed to be always innovative, fearless and proactive. He was unable to have a poor day, make a mistake, or acknowledge uncertainty or fear. The man who was behind Bad Chad had to keep up with his outrageous persona at all costs. A missing post here, a shorter than normal video there. It began quietly. Chad would dismiss fans' inquiries about whether something was amiss with a shrug or a jest. But eventually the fissures showed. The tension was mounting. The workload continued unabated, and the expectations increased with every new episode or vehicle unveiling. Watching for entertainment purposes was no longer the norm. They observed in order to evaluate, test and critique him. At that point, fandom's darker side emerged. Every message of praise was followed by one full of derision, skepticism or plain hatred. He was a hack according to some. Others said that his tactics put clients in danger. Some even questioned his connection with Jolene, his character, and his intelligence. What began as criticism turned into a personal attack. Chad didn't break even then though. He intensified. He put more effort into his projects, uploaded lengthier movies, and added more flair, edge and intricacy. He wasn't merely attempting to disprove his detractors. He was making an effort to live up to the myth that had been spread about him, a mythology in which weakness was not tolerated. Behind the camera, the toll was getting intolerable. A legend who couldn't say, "I'm not okay." Chad was emotionally, physically, and psychologically spent, but the show had to continue on screen. He mastered compartmentalization, learned to chuckle while quietly unwinding, and learned to smile under pressure. For what would happen if he was honest? If fans saw the real Bad Chad, the one who worried, felt overwhelmed, and occasionally wanted to give up, what would they think? He thought he knew the answer already. They would be let down, they would betray him, they would no longer accept the myth, thus he concealed it. He concealed his restless nights, his worry before filming, his dread of disappointing fans, his guilt about not answering every message, and his rage when hate mail, letters and emails full of insults, nastiness, and even threats arrived in his inbox. Some were from people who just didn't understand him. Others were from persons who had previously identified as fans. However, because Awful Chad didn't discuss it, nobody noticed that. He erected a wall between himself and the outside world instead. A wall of self-assurance, irony, and unrelenting effort, and he believed he could make it through it, as long as the mythology remained alive and the builds continued. The man was cracking inside though. The man, the myth, and the dual life could no longer be sustained. He couldn't continue to act as though nothing was wrong. He couldn't continue to affirm the picture while rejecting his own mental health. And after a while, it was too much. Something changed at 53. It might have been age. Burnout might have been the cause. Perhaps it had finally reached a point where the agony of faking outweighed the terror of being honest. For some reason, Chad came out of hiding. Cracks start to appear. Chad was able to maintain the illusion for some time. The building became more erratic. Sharp-eyed spectators started to realize that something had changed. Even though the vehicles were more intricate, the videos more stylish, and the energy was still tremendous. The initial indications were faint. Chad appeared more agitated in certain Bad Chad Customs episodes. Mid-project he would lose it. He appeared to have heavier eyes. Though less impromptu, the once frequent lively banter with his partner Jolene was still present. He stopped posting frequently on social media. Additionally, he frequently alluded to fatigue, hardship, or nebulous emotional exhaustion in his captions when he did post. Fans initially attributed it to the typical ups and downs. All artists ultimately burn out, don't they? However, worry gradually turned into conjecture. Was Chad all right? Was he finally succumbing to the demands of managing a program, a business, and remaining current? Then the criticism surfaced. Online discussion boards, especially Reddit, and specialized car builder communities, began criticizing everything from his management style to his welding methods. His constructions were deemed dangerous by some. His lack of formal training was ridiculed by others. Bad Chad is not so much a mechanic as a sculptor. The most critical comments didn't end with his work. One user said, "Looks cool, but I wouldn't drive it." They took it personally. They questioned his connection, his attitude, and his ego. There were rumors of drama occurring behind the scenes. Insightful remarks regarding Hiltz Auto Co.'s true operations were made by anonymous accounts. Some even conjectured about breakups, breakdowns, or both when Jolene stopped posting on Instagram. Chad never responded to the rumors directly. His style was never like that. However, his smile appeared forced in several videos. His gaze shifted further, as though he was looking for something that was just beyond the frame. It was getting more difficult to conceal the truth. Chad was drowning in private. There were more than a few anonymous insults in the hate letters. The stream had stabilized. He was accused of selling out in some letters. His past, his body, and his character were all assaulted by others. Some even contained subliminal threats. He initially made an effort to ignore them. Then he began to conceal them, sometimes from himself, and other times even from Jolene. A drawer with a tiny mound of agony rising silently. He convinced himself that it didn't matter, that he could outbuild the hate, and that he was stronger than this. In his heart, though, it was more important than he wanted to acknowledge. And it seeped into everything else the more he suppressed it. His inventiveness, concentration, tolerance, and happiness. His greatest passion, building, was now plagued by pressure and uncertainty. No longer was every car merely a project. It was a defense, a last-ditch effort to disprove the trolls and preserve the myth. However, a man can only wear a mask for so long. He would soon break rather than just display cracks. Fans were taken aback when he did. Not just by what he disclosed, but also by how long he had concealed it, the admission, and his eventual confession at the age of 53. A silent video was uploaded on the internet, late one evening. There was no hoopla, no manufactured moment, no dramatic build-up. Alone in his garage, Chad Hiltz is at last prepared to speak about what he has kept hidden for years. No showman flair, no wild motions, no tank tops. He appeared older than normal, and exhausted, as if the burden of something long concealed had finally taken its toll. Chad showed a side of himself that few had ever seen in this uncensored moment, one that was raw, sensitive, and emotionally spent. After decades of persevering with courage and determination, he finally acknowledged that he had been battling in secret. The cause was an unrelenting barrage of personal assaults, criticism and hate mail that had collected over a number of years. It began modestly, with the odd angry emails sent out after a new episode. At first he didn't mind, figuring it was part of the deal, but gradually the volume rose and the tone grew harder. Slowly, what started out as criticism of his techniques or automobile designs evolved into intensely personal and frequently harsh remarks that attacked not only his work but also his personality, IQ, and even his private life. As the negativity grew more intense, Chad established a routine. The worst messages would be gathered, printed or written out, and stored in a drawer in his workplace. Eventually, that drawer came to represent his own personal trash can for the negativity he would not allow others to see. Not Jolene, not his team, nor his fans. He couldn't afford to be open about how much it all hurt because he was under pressure to keep up the public perception of Bad Chad as the brave rebel who never allowed anything shake him. Opening up, in his opinion, would be interpreted as weakness and a betrayal of the persona that people had grown to love. He therefore performed the role. He concealed everything else behind the camera while grinning and building. However, his refusal to accept it did not erase the emotional toll. His creative approach was infiltrated by the anxiousness. His face started to show signs of weariness. His old delight in creating art out of rust gradually gave way to a grating sense of duty. He was no longer only a car builder. In order to defend himself against the things being spoken about him, he started constructing armor. That silence became too painful to endure emotionally. Chad removed the mask in this uncommon and solemn film. He didn't make it dramatic. He just stated the facts. He had been forced to internalize the venom that had been thrown at him for years. Because he felt that maintaining the myth that others wanted him to sustain was more important than his mental health, he had decided to suffer in silence. Chad's revelations extended beyond his own struggles. It brought attention to a more significant problem: the unseen weight that public personalities, particularly those praised for their toughness, bear. People like Chad are supposed to be unbreakable in a culture that frequently views vulnerability as failure, and they suffer alone when they're not. His choice to speak up at last did more than simply dispel the negative perception of Chad. It forced everyone in the crowd to reconsider their initial expectations of him. The video didn't have a dramatic conclusion. No conclusion. It was just a man's decision to come out of hiding, even if it meant disappointing others who thought he was untouchable. The man who created the legend suddenly came into full view, real, but not perfect or unbeatable. Regaining his voice on YouTube and television, Chad Hiltz quickly rose from being the tenacious underdog from Nova Scotia to becoming a well-known personality in the custom automobile industry after Bad Chad Customs debuted on the Discovery Channel. The idea behind the show was original. Building crazy, inventive vehicles out of salvage scrap and junkyard scraps is the work of a small-town genius without any official training. No extravagant sponsors or huge budgets, just unadulterated talent and unrelenting effort. The audiences were captivated. In contrast to the overly polished formulaic auto shows that were already overtaking television, Chad's unique voice, mad scientist inventiveness, and rebellious approach to automobile creation provided a welcome change of pace. Both Chad and the builds had soul, even though they weren't necessarily attractive in the traditional sense. He was adored by viewers because he was genuine, not because he was flawless. Bad Chad Customs became one of Discovery's most popular unscripted shows, and soon attracted a devoted audience, broadcasting in several nations. However, something else was simmering behind the rising stardom. The needs of production grew along with the show. What began as an impromptu, interactive, let's construct it and see type of event evolved into one that was more organized, polished and packaged. Storylines were what the producers desired. They desired strict deadlines. They desired drama from Chad, as well as from the automobiles. The gritty quality that had initially drawn viewers to the show started to seem filtered. To get better photos, scenes were repeated. To improve audio clarity, conversations were re-recorded. Chad began to lose the freedom that had shaped who he was. Additionally, as Bad Chad's brand was booming,
The man behind it was subtly growing weary. Chad focused on YouTube, a smaller platform that he could actually control, in the midst of this media frenzy. He had experimented with the platform previously, sharing updates from his shop, time-lapses of construction, and behind-the-scenes movies, but it now became a real option, a means of escaping the spotlight and getting back to something more intimate, unfiltered, and uniquely his. YouTube didn't require any rights, approvals, or editing notes from foreign producers, unlike television. Without filters or intermediaries, Chad could record a video in the morning, post it that afternoon, and communicate with his audience immediately. McIntyre described the timing of things as being somewhat coincidental, and it struck a chord. Despite the postponement or cancellation of fresh TV seasons, his subscriber base started to grow rapidly. In search of a bad Chad that felt more like a genuine person and less like a fictional character, viewers started switching from cable to his channel. It was reflected in the remarks. More connection, less criticism. The cars were no longer the only thing people were looking for. They were keeping an eye out for him. Chad found room to be vulnerable on YouTube. He made his argument without the need of spectacular camera angles or musical cues. He might discuss pressure, exhaustion, and the true meaning of building when the cameras are off and the payments are due. He didn't have to worry about if his stories would be appropriate for the episode. Hiltz explained how they altered their focus to social media once the pandemic shut down Season 3, saying, "We've turned a TV proposition into a multi-million-dollar YouTube channel.